Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Yaaseen Barnes, and this is the Muslims Connected podcast, a podcast for those seeking growth and progression in their lives. Today, we are joined by the CEO, big title, of Okaf, Mr. Uncle, Mickaeel Collier.
Shukran. Thank you for having me. I don't know if I'm quite a mister. Well, I am a mister because I mean in today's world that could be a very challenging comment to make. But Buta uncle, I don't know. It always feels a bit weird when you have people saying Uncle Buta Mickaeel. So anyway, whatever goes.
I feel like Buta and Uncle is one of those terms where if someone calls you that, it's a sign of respect, but at the same time, it also means like, please, just lower myself for that. So CEO is a big title to hold. But when we went through your bio, they said that you had leadership roles from 12 already. Where and how does that start?
So I went a few years earlier to school than is normally
Makes sense.
expected. So at the age of 12, I was at South Peninsula High School
Shout out to SP.
in grade 6. Standard 6 grade, grade 8. And there was a dying Islamic students movement at the time. Called the ISM or ISM. ISM is also synonymous in Arabic with name or so. So it was about identity and those type of things. And I naturally, from the family background that I came from, my father was a teacher. He was a political activist. He was an athlete. At the time when he was running, he ran the fastest 100 and 200 meter in Africa. Wow. So if you look at me, I've definitely got my mother's genes. Right, but at the end of the day, I think that that foundation that he laid, and my mother was also politically conscious and active, and we were always exposed to community events, political events, part of the anti-apartheid struggle. I recall that, and something that I reflect on maybe as an adult and later on in life, that you have certain defining moments in your experience that defines who you become later on in life. At the time, those moments are not necessarily important to you, but you reflect back on what those moments meant and how it impacted you. And there were a few incidents that I can recall. I think I was about 5 years old when my father was arrested, and he was incarcerated along with Dala Umar and Derek Naidu, and there was a young Ibrahim Rasool also in Victor Verster at the time. I think they were there. And every Sunday, my mother, Dala Umar's wife, Auntie Farida, and another inmate's wife, we would trek to Victor Verster prison to go and visit them. And obviously, because the breadwinner is not in the house, you have limited access, but we never felt it. You weren't conscious of it as a child. And I recall an incident later on in my life that actually was part of shaping that experience or that leadership calling or that need to serve. I was visiting my father and seeing him through a thick glass. And because there was no money, they would prepare sandwiches as patkos, but it was a cheese sandwich with white bread. And throughout the visit, my father was looking at the sandwich and not at me. But as a 5-year-old, I didn't connect as to what was going on. And later on in life, I realized, hey, but that guy was on a hunger strike. So that sandwich to us was a cheese sandwich, but to that guy in prison, that was actually what he was, fixated on. And, various other things. And I mean, I think it was standard 3, grade 5. And there was some political prisoners who were about to be hanged under apartheid regime. And he told me, you must take these pamphlets and give it to your friends at school to take home. And I thought to myself, yeah, it's not something cool to go and take political paraphernalia to school and hand it out and tell your friends to take it home. And I remember, and sorry for the name, but I remember this friend of mine, classmate, his name was Yaaseen. And I
Sorry
gave
for
it
the
to
name,
him.
let's say. Mashallah for the
No, but
name.
you'll hear why. Sorry for the name. But he took the pamphlet and he crumbled it up and he threw it in the bin. He said, "Don't give it to me. What you doing giving these things?" And I went into attack mode. And I explained to him, I said, "What about your father if he was about to be, executed and all these things?" And the second profound incident in my life was where Yaaseen then came and he took the paper out of the dirt bin, he straightened it out, and he said, "I'm taking it home." So that kind of laid the foundation to say that you've got to serve and there is meaning to serving.
So what you've learned in your life is that Yaaseen's start off rough and then we get better.
Yeah. I think that it's the consciousness that we have got to transmit about, firstly, issues around truth, justice, and standing up for that which is right.
So it's also, I feel like you've learned some big lessons from a young age already. Firstly, to see your father go through such turmoil, and then also going, I need to still fight the cause at home. And then also teaching I think is a big lesson that you learned there also, to go that someone can be wrong, but they can come around if we just keep giving for them.
And I think it's also the fact that you must never lose hope in humanity. Sometimes the way in which we transmit the message, we expect people to naturally be aligned to a certain type of thinking, or to, it's like almost like, why can't they get it, right? But sometimes it's the way in which we transmit that message. And I learn it from my own experience with my kids. I've got 4 children. And the eldest and the youngest, their brains are aligned, right? So they will watch a movie. And I hope they don't listen to this, but the 2 of them will get the higher grade jokes.
Nice.
Right? And the 2 middle ones, their brains are very similar and aligned. So they will get like the most ridiculous of jokes, right? I'm sure I haven't tested them to listen to your jokes, so we don't know if you're higher grade or standard grade or those ridiculous type of jokes. But the way in which we then engage and deal with each one of them has to be different. Sometimes, most of the times, we get it wrong. But there are certain times that you realize when it's important things, how to engage with people. The difficult jobs that the prophets had was how to deal with people within their society. So the mission itself isn't necessarily the complicated part of it. It's how to connect with individuals, how to manage people and their personalities and their expectations and their lack of expectations and just their whole mindset around things that becomes the challenge.
That's actually the question I was leading into. As a parent and as I'll say community leader, how do we instill like leadership onto the youth now? How do we show the youth that they must go on and not just be, I'll say, pacifists in their communities, but also be like activists and be active in making the community better?
So, of late, I've been attending many leaders' janazas, right? And they're starting to die off, which means that we're starting to, our generation, starting to fulfill the roles of leaders and elders. Becoming an elder, right, within the community. So when you look at that, and I always comment that when the elders that we looked up to, they were our safety nets.
Yeah.
So we had the ability to take certain risks and do certain crazy things as youngsters would do, very radical and change things with violence and fighting, and that's another life lesson that I learned the very hard way. We'll get there, but so they act as your safety net. Our task now is to set the flag. We've carried the flag. Our previous generation, they've planted the flag. We currently carrying that flag of Islam and the flag of humanity, the flag of truth, justice. At least we try to do that, so that we don't have genocides in the world. We don't have oppression. We don't have an auntie that is walking down a or standing outside a masjid where there's a KFC right next door and cannot even afford to purchase something in the shop, but is tormented by the smell of that KFC when we approaching Ramadan, and some of our massages are next to the maybe takeouts, and you know what it feels like. 1 o'clock when they're getting ready to mass produce food, and you get those smells. Now imagine the torture and torment that somebody that knows, number one, they don't have money, number two, there's no way that they can even walk into that shop, and they're watching you eat out of a restaurant or out of a takeaway. So it's our responsibility for the next generation is to say, this is that flag, this is the consciousness. You need to ensure that that flag is held up, and you need to ensure that you place it even further than we've left it off. One of the Sahaba in the battle, he was carrying that flag of Islam, and his arms were cut off, and he ended up keeping it with his stumps, and he couldn't anymore, and he ended up carrying it under his chin. But that flag can never fall. So our responsibility is to ensure that we instill within the next generation that consciousness that flag cannot fall, and that flag needs to be held up high and carried forward.
I think it's also, as I'll say, as people or as a community that holds the flag now, we also must realize that we must give it over also, and we must we are the shoulder, we are the shoulders and the ladders for the next generation. What have you, as your family and your teachers, instilled in you that drove you to become the leader that you are now?
I wouldn't say I'm a leader, but we're aspiring. We've been placed in a position.
CEO is a leader position. I feel like it's enough to take the title.
It's a title, but it doesn't change anything. You still need to be humble enough to carry a box. But the problem is, if the same people carry boxes for 20 years, that's not progress.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that is the very critical point that you are speaking about mentoring that next generation. Often we find within our communities that leaders want to, we see it in our political leaders, we see it even in our organizational leadership structures, particularly, should I go down that road? Maybe not. But within our community type organizations and institutions, you find that people have a real challenge in handing over the reins, because I don't think it's for power, maybe in certain instances, but I think that the issue is that whether that vision that they've strived so hard to establish and to plant as a foundational principles within the community is actually going to survive. And the issue around leadership is that a good leader is not somebody that is able to manage people like robots, because we can have robots. It's very easy. You just do this, do that, etc. But good leadership is to instill within people that confidence to say that I can do this. I can take it further. I am able to step up to the plate. And I think that's another lesson that I learned from my father and from elders within my the community that I was part of. I think we were about 14 or 15, and there was a youth conference in Sudan, and my father said, okay, there's a conference. Literally, we got the invite on Sunday evening. Monday, he booked myself and a very close friend of mine, Abdurazak Ibrahim, a little bit older than me, and he said, right, the two of you are going.
So we're 14 years old, we're in Sudan, at the youth conference. What's happening in your head, and what are you learning from the space?
So the first thing was, we arrived in Khartoum, and they put us in a hotel. You must remember there was civil war in Sudan at the time, right? We were just emerging out of it. So they shack us up in this hotel, and they tell us you're going to the Hilton, and we're like, Hilton is like cool. And we got to the Hilton had no water. right? Because it was closed for 5 years. No running toilets, nothing. And we see this massive pipe going from the Nile River, pumping into the Hilton Hotel. So they were literally pumping water from the Nile River into the hotel in order to give us water, which was like, I don't know if you watched that movie Blood Diamonds. When you open the tap, it's like black brown water that's coming out. So that's
slush is happening.
Slush is happening as we, and obviously you develop now gastrointestinal issues over there, no water, and anyway, 2 nights in that hotel, and they decide no, it's unsustainable. They're going to move us to the Parliamentary Hotel. And we think, right,
another upgrade.
One
more star.
Yeah, only to realize we needed to carry our water from the passageways into those. But all those things, life-changing experiences. We met with, at the time, Sheikh Hassan Turabi, who was one of the foremost political leaders of Sudan, and I would say one of the Islamic giants at the time. And one of the lessons he taught us, he spoke about 11 or 12 languages. And in the meeting, he told us, number one, besides our responsibility as youth, etc., but he said, if you regard yourself as an intellectual, if you regard yourself as a leader, and you speak more than one language, when you address a crowd, you only speak in that particular language. So don't come first with a whole lot of Arabic talks, etc., and then you want to translate it to English. That doesn't show intellectualism. That shows that you're wanting to show somebody, I can speak more than one language. Yeah. But the challenge is to convert your thoughts from a foreign language into another language and stick to that in that particular language. So those are one of the small life lessons that we learned. And then obviously, going back to Egypt, experiencing the taxis and those that study from, in Egypt who tell you about those things. But it's those life lessons that compelled me to grow up very, very fast. And then we go to university, and we were part of, at the time, Cape Town was very rife with a lot of, I would say, the transition from apartheid to democracy, and there was a very significant transition for the Muslim community during that period. Do you form part of the new dispensation? Do you oppose that new dispensation because certain people felt that the revolution had been halted and that it should have ran its natural course so that you could have a more equitable transition or dispensation that came about, and not compromise in a negotiated settlement that still ensured that the riches of the country remained within the hands of certain people. And in hindsight, possibly they were right. And at that time, I was very fortunate to go to Kosovo. I was in university, I think first or second year university, about 18 years old. And we were the first people to enter. Firstly, I went with a Turkish group.
What year are you at UCT?
UCT, yeah. So that was about 96, around there.
Oh, so fresh in the change of...
Yeah, so my generation is almost like that middle lost. We're not quite revolutionaries under apartheid, and you're not quite Democrats in the new dispensation. You're like in that transition
but also
period.
Test subjects to an extent as well.
100%.
Because no one knew, you guys were in a world that didn't exist 2 years before that.
Correct.
With people who had to change their mind to see you as equal, even though that wasn't always the case, I feel like.
Sure.
And then what was Kosovo? Like, how did you get to Kosovo, and what got you to Kosovo?
At that, I studied political science at university, and like you said, we were the test experiment, and I was almost like the university opened up a new faculty or a new stream called democratic governance, and it was myself, 3 of us. It was myself, and strangely enough, South African democratic governance, but they had 2 Americans in there studying with us, right? And then we were like the first year that did this whole course. So we were that beta
Yeah.
versions. Okay. And at that time, it was the Kosovo War, Bosnian War just ended, Kosovo War started, Albania, etc., and the refugees were in there. And a friend of mine went to Albania with, I think it was Islamic Relief at the time, and we had connections with the Turks and a Turkish organization called IHH. I wasn't able to go with them. And again, same friend that went with me to Egypt. The two of us went to
The traveling boys.
the traveling guys, right? And we ended up going into Turkey. And for some other reason, Abdul Razak wasn't able to come with. And I then ended up going alone through to Kosovo. When I got there, I needed to have met my team at, call it 2 o'clock. Arrived there 5 o'clock, the team was gone. And anyway, they graciously assisted me to go with a French guy that worked for an international humanitarian organization. And I ended up going from the one city where we landed with him through the United Nations border into Pristina, the capital of Kosovo. And anyway, we get there, I missed the team again. But I got dropped off at I think it was like an Islamic educational complex type of a thing. And you must remember, we were now the first people to enter after the refugees had fled. So the borders had just opened. And anyway, we get to this place and the team is gone because it's like war, you've got to move. So they couldn't wait for me. And I'm like 18 years old and all that I see is people bringing dead bodies into this place. Right? And I'm like, I'm a little bit, I would say, freak bug. I'm a teenager and I'm seeing this the scene happening.
Also in mass, it's like, I feel like as a Muslim, when we see a janaza, it's one body, and it's under a circumstance that you see.
I still have some of the photos that I managed to take, but anyway, the team's not there, and this guy from France decides he drops me off, and I asked him, "But where are you going? My team's not here." So he told me, I got you here. I've got a mission to go to. So I said, but now what's going to happen to me? They said, Allah put you in the situation and Allah will get you out of the situation. And the guy closes his door and he goes. And I'm like, okay, now what do I, like really now I'm surrounded with dead bodies and people who have lost family members, etc. And I mean, it caused me a lot of PTSD later on when I got back.
Trauma.
But if I think of it now, that is one of the moments that also says, like, you're in the situation, it's happening now, you've got to, and luckily, alhamdulillah, Allah got me out of the situation. I met another few youngsters who had also they stayed behind to protect their family homes and to protect their city and their masjids, etc. And their families had escaped as refugees. So they took me along and I spent a few days with them until I met my team again. And anyway, I went with the team. But it's these type of events and incidents in your life that prepares you for maybe, I don't know, later on something to come down the line.
I feel like you're a person of adventure. Like adventure just comes for you. It seems like there's always a thing, a moment that's, I'll say, out of place for the norm. What would you say is how does that happen to you? What's the thing that you allow to throw to you?
And maybe it's the first time that it's actually dawning on me what you're trying to say. But because I'm known in the family to be the overcautious one, right? The one that thinks of the consequence. My sister would climb on the roof to fetch the cricket ball, and I would say, right, go up and get the the ball. I wouldn't do that. Those type of things, like. So it's interesting that you say that, but I think, somebody commented that had the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam not lost his parents at a young age, that was part of the process in maturing the Prophet ﷺ to become that leader of compassion, of mercy, etc.
Makes a lot of
Because he
sense,
could
yeah.
identify. So those hard lessons are taught early on in life that then allows you to unlock that potential later on. So each of us have, I believe, those particular moments. And getting to back to the whole Kosovo story and the radicalism of youth, etc. So you do things without conscience. I mean, we ran protest demonstrations at UCT. It was the 50th anniversary of the founding of the illegitimate state of Israel, right? And we had marches, and we had, I'm thinking like all my history is now coming out, like, you know, unpacking some things that I haven't spoken freely about. You're just having this effect on me to
open up to speak. For the stories.
So anyway, so you first told you can't have the march, and then we negotiated with the vice chancellor, and then he allowed us eventually to have the march, and we decided we're going to go to the Kaplan Center. And one of the conditions was that we are not allowed to burn the Israeli flag. And we said, okay, no problem, we're not going to burn the flag. But we had another plan in place. So,
as the youth must have.
As the radical type of youth must have. And we gave the flag to a guy called, also with a Y, Yusuf, right? And Yusuf's job was to bring the flag out and hand it over to the students who were counter-protesting us at the Kaplan Center. And when they saw the flag come out, they naturally thought we're going to burn it, which we had no intention of doing, right? But we wanted somebody from them to come and say, we don't recognize the flag, come and collect the flag, right? And anyway, there were some emotions that went a little bit high on that side, and we left the flag on the floor. And some guys in the march decided, okay, we can't burn the flag, but maybe we can walk over the flag. So anyway, I got my student card pulled in and for that incident, and you know, we had to now negotiate to stay at university afterwards because we now violated the laws of the university. And through that negotiations, I actually became quite friendly with the deputy vice chancellor at the time. And I think that was another lesson of how you can be radical, but you've got to be meted in your approach to. There's many ways, as I say, to skin a cat. And immediately after that, I went on the Kosovo experience. And when I saw the effect that war has on a people, where you would have a perfectly normal road, and this tank comes, and it just, one passing by, it churns up an entire road. Or it needs to go through an alley and it just pushes it down, a whole house down, because it needs to go and find that. I think the devastation that war causes to community made me come back and say, I actually consciously, whether it was a PTSD, I don't know, but consciously the effects that I could see that violence and war has on a society allowed me to take a step back for about maybe 2 or 3 years. And I just said, what is it now? Where do you go? Because if you're going to bring war to the country, or civil war, bomb up a place and do that, that's not going to work. It's just too devastating. We're seeing it play out in Gaza now. It will take generations upon generations to rectify, firstly, the physical and psychological trauma that has been meted out on the people of that particular region. You can rebuild very quickly, but what is then etched in your DNA, and DNA has cell history and memories, etc., that takes generations to overcome. They were saying that just before the Iraqi war, I was reading an article when the US invaded Iraq, just 2 years before that, the Iraqi population had managed to overcome the devastation caused by the Mongols that invaded Iraq.
Wow.
So you're talking about hundreds of years that devastates and decimates people's psyche, their outlook on life, and how they perceive and how they act and react to certain world events. And I think that is the challenge that I came back with. And for about 2 years, 3 years, I was not part of community activities because I needed to deconstruct what was happening and find a way. And just as I got married, I was invited to a meeting around the establishment of a sustainable organization. And being in politics as sustainable, you just hear the word sustainable. At that time, it was a sustainable conference, United Nations Sustainable Development. We were looking at sustainable development in South Africa, and here's an Islamic organization saying they are promoting a sustainable project. So I attended, and anyway, the rest is history. We then formed Okaf South Africa, or assisted to form Okaf South Africa with, I would say, great visionaries and great leaders, like Zainul Kaji was the recent former CEO of Okaf, but still our leader and mentor. Brother Arun Kala, that I've learned so much from, and so many others, Dr. Ram Saluji, all people who are older than what I am, Raghib Najjar, etc. So I was very fortunate. I was always the youngest person in the room. Like, I'm the youngest type of a thing, right? And sometimes my kids joke with me, and I hope some of my friends are not going to hear this, but if I get them in the shopping mall, they said, you know, Daddy, in the next 5 years, all your friends are going to be dead. Bad joke, but the reality is most of them, the fortunate part that I've had in my life experience is that I've always been exposed to an older brother, older mentor that has really acted as that safety net. So yeah, that's where we are now.
So would you say that I'll say your mind is young, but your knowledge is beyond your years, and that's been like the motivation and the driving force of, I'll say, of you with Okaf.
I don't know how to phrase it, but yeah. So I would say,
because I'll say your tactics and the way you think, from what I've seen with the organization, it's not like just normal, oh, we're a charity organization that does this and this is the thing we do all the time. You're constantly pushing forward to look for new ways of doing things.
So exactly that. I think that is the unique, strong point of Okaf South Africa and its membership. Visionary. We see ourselves not as an organization or institution, but rather as a movement that is looking to re-establish or reintroduce principles of civilizational goals and civilizational aims. If we look at where we are in the world, the Muslim community has, I would say, the West is leading in technology. Although you have people from Indian and Asian
developing in
the mindset, but the push and the drive, it's all coming from the West.
Yeah.
At the same time, what they don't have is civilizational and moral goals that is coming out.
Yeah,
it's all about consumerism. It's about materialism. It's about the accessing of resources to the detriment of so many others. It's about the individual hedonistic type of lifestyle. Capitalism that is, and there's certain problems in socialism as well and communism as well. But it's that type of individualism that is being promoted without accountability and without responsibility to ensuring that the person that is standing outside of that KFC or that takeaways is actually going to get the meal as well. Mm-hmm. And those foundational principles that looks at justice, equality, humanity, morals, those principles are mostly lost in the society that you've got. So if we look at where we are supposed to fit in as a society, it's or as an organization, it's to have those moral civilizational goals that would ensure that we are not just there, or we don't live in a society that is individualistic based. It's just about ourselves, what I can get, what is in it for me, bugger the rest of the world. So this is where we can play a contribution, where you have knowledge that is transmitted, but knowledge that has a purpose behind it. Knowledge that provides hope and dignity to people. A society that has principles that develop that hope and that dignity. Because if a person doesn't have dignity, then anything is free.
That's you.
To them, right?
It's very true.
And if you do not have dignity, you do not have any form of consciousness. I mean, you look at a person that lives on the side of the road. That person's humanity and dignity is stripped. He's got no hope left, right? He walks around aimlessly, right? And what we do is we drive past, and it's like not my problem. It's like a burden if somebody comes to you while you're eating a burger in your car, for example, or if you're eating a packet of chips or something of that particular nature. So how do we transform society? And when we looked at this whole mission, what are we doing? What is the target within our organizational space, within our society? What are we there to do? Are we there to perpetuate things? Are we there to continue restricting Yaaseen to getting a food hamper whilst it's good? But what do we do to you when we give you that food hamper, right?
Yeah.
You strip the person firstly from his dignity, right? Because we want to also brand it. All organizations do that. And it's a catch-22 because now you've got to be accountable to donors. You've got to be seen to showing what you're doing in the workspace, right? That you are finding yourself in. And it's usually around being accountable to your donor base. So we put that down and we tell him go walk down the road and go home. Collect it from the office and go home and walk with a sticker on the side of the packet. But when he gets home, maybe the guy doesn't like beans because he's got gastro problems if he eats beans.
Very true.
But we prescribe what he must eat, right? So we prescribe what he must eat. And then the third problem with that is we take him out of the economy because he doesn't know how to go into a shop to shop for items, right? That maybe he likes cheese, but cheese on our list is a little bit too expensive, and because of the whole cold food chain, it's got the potential to go old. So what we do, instead of the cheese, we add another baked beans to it, right? Give the guy more.
You actually giving him less than what he can eat, essentially.
Essentially, but also we're being so prescriptive to what he's got to do. So in the process, what we're actually doing is, instead of building up a person, we go for the quick fix solutions, and we end up having unintended consequences from a good action. So if you look at the Okaf model, right, within Islamic social finance, I always say that we've got two components. You've got zakah, which then helps the guy with that immediate need to eat or to be looked after within the 8 categories that zakah beneficiaries are prescribed to be within, to act within, or their categories. And our institutions and organizations are fantastic at organizing, at getting to respond to the dire needs of our society, whether it be in the Muslim community of South Africa or South Africa in general, right? Our community was one of the first to respond under the COVID-19 pandemic. in a very coordinated fashion, right? I was very
Which
fortunate
you led as well.
to have been part of founding that with Muhammad Kaji, and just coordinating it. So we said, we know this pandemic is coming. How do we address it? We know we're going to contribute, but let's have an impact on that. And the SA Muslims COVID-19 task team was established and coordinated, and the community responded exceptionally well to the needs during COVID period. And I mean, we're not going to talk about whether COVID was real or fake. That's not that. It was an event that took place, and there were certain challenges and needs. So those 8 categories of zakatable people were very quickly sorted out through that component, the zakah component of Islamic social finance. Then you've got on the other side, it's the Wakaf model. It's that model that is there to bring about sustainability. So how the Wakaf works is, and that's why I had this natural affinity towards it. How it works is that we know a masjid is there. You can't go take a brick out of the masjid.
Yeah.
It's there for the use of the community. It's there for from now until the end of time, and it's there to serve a particular purpose. But the concept of Wakaf that was introduced by the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was a developmental type of a concept, right? Which means that you're preserving the wealth of your community through community donations. So you would give us 100 Rand, this one would give us 100 Rand. We pool the resources together. We can't use a cent out of the 100 because, remembering the masjid, you can't take a brick out of the masjid, right? You can't take a Rand out of the 100 Rand. You pool the resources and you invest it into assets that the community owns, essentially. And the return of that investment is then used for a whole host of downstream social beneficial projects, which is obviously within the alignment of Islamic principles. So you may be passionate about arts and culture, and within that, comedy, right? So, but you had a very rough time as a comedian because now you had to rely on a gig, and you don't want other comedians who are there not just to make jokes, but to I see comedians as playing a very necessary social role in socializing our community.
Sees us like that.
Right? Because you get people to think in a different way, right? Through getting your message across. So you may establish a wakaf for that particular person. So hopefully you can give us 100,000, but that then remains intact, and the returns of that investment is used to grow your wakaf and used for the stated purpose that you have dedicated it to. So some people have given us a wakaf for cataracts. Remember, the capital that they gave us remains intact. As the investment grows, it grows. So your return gets more. And as a result, we've been able to dent, as of 2024, about close to 12,000 free cataract operations.
Wow, mashallah.
That's just one component, right? So that cataract usually costs the state about 18 to 20,000 Rand. There's a 200,000 patient backlog on the cataract. So we've managed to dent, 5% of the 200,000.
5% is big. Like it sounds small, but it's actually a big number. And also in terms of the life that you give the person as well.
Exactly. So it's life-changing, it's transformative. But imagine if we as a community, we are able to dent 20%. How relevant do we become to South African society through our contribution, our benevolence, and our coordination within that benevolence? And because the Wakaf is a sustainable mechanism, we can commit to saying each year we're going to dent 10% or 20% into that. So within a period of 5 years, you've cleared the backlog.
That's amazing.
Right? And you've still got the capital intact. So the resource that was given is not just, right, okay, there's 100 Rand or 1,000 Rand for the operation.
And now
it's finished and client's gone. All right? That remains intact, it grows, and it allows us each year to do more and more and more cataract operations. We've got about 50 to 60,000 kids per year that's on a maths intervention program. So that maths intervention program allows a kid to maybe access university. Last year we had a student from a rural area on our maths program for the year, had 18% in June and ended up with 85% at the end of the year.
Sure.
And his story is documented. Now he's got a bursary to go to UCT and he's studying medicine, right? One of the teachers in the rural area also joined the class because he said, I'm in a rural area. I wasn't a maths teacher, but because there's no matric maths teacher, I need to teach maths and I can't teach maths. So that teacher's also on the program. So it's those type of things. We've done about about 60.
So it's the Okaf is basically the marathon. It's not the sprint.
It's the marathon.
It's setting up institutions that lead further than just what we have right now.
Sure.
But also the interesting part of letting a child go from 18 to 85 in maths essentially is letting them change the way they see the world. Because they go, oh, I can become more, and then also their peers go, because if someone's getting 18, I go, that's not the smartest child in the class, but if you can get more, then I can get more. So the small institute or program you have for that one child lets a whole class become better, and a whole class becomes better, the whole community becomes better, and again for generations, it just snowballs into bigger things.
No, most definitely. So it's that story of saving a life. Right? Because one of our other programs was a sports program. We ran a cricket tournament. And some people say you're working on cricket, then you're working on arts and culture, then you're working on cataracts, then you're working on leadership development, and you're sending people all over the show to various conferences, etc. What's it all about? So it's about that civilizational development. When Islam was at its height, the Waqf system was at its peak, right? Because it funded a host of intellectuals with the freedom to say, I'm going to explore the stars, right? I'm going to give each of those stars an Arabic name, right? I'm going to discover what the Quran talks about when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks in the Quran about Tariq, that knocking, right? And this is what Muslims have uncovered. Muslims were pioneers in cataract surgery. The textbooks that Europe was using were Muslim textbooks for 500-600 years.
The number system that we have today is
it's all based on that. And at that time, the Islamic civilizational peak was reached because of that system that the Waqf was able to, on a sustainable way, support institutions, support individuals, in order to have that flexibility to do without being prescribed to.
But we see it so often where people with potential, people that have the talent, people that have the mindset, can't go study further or can't go follow their dreams, I'll say, because they must feed a household. So I feel like with our systems, like the system of Okaf, they get to follow their dreams, but also like their bases will be covered at the same time. That's what we must work for.
Most definitely. And at the end of the day, it ensures that as an institution, Okaf South Africa plays a developmental role. It's a multi-generational institution. So it took us about maybe 20 years to lay that foundation, to educate the community, to say that, look, maybe if we follow the prophetic sunnah, the prophetic tradition, there's a different way of how we spend our resources in order to capacitate our communities and the needs of our communities in a long term. And when I talk about community, we talk about ummah. It's not the Muslim ummah. We live within a pluralistic society, and therefore our impact has to be for all of humanity, not just for a Muslim household. Because the context in which we live in is that the Muslim household is next to a Christian household, next to a Jewish household, next to, various other communities that exist within the pluralism that we find ourselves in. And therefore our relevance and our impact has to be on all of humanity. And we see that happening through the system. So it's like the growth of Okaf has been over this 23, 24-year period, it's been like that bamboo effect, right? So you know the story of a bamboo, right? Bamboo takes very long to grow, but when it starts growing, it doubles and triples over each growth spurt that it goes. So that's where we are now. We've got a good fund. I wouldn't say it's a very good fund. It's a good fund for
a strong base
to propel us to assisting even more and more through the support of the community. Last year, we funded about 196 different organizations to capacitate them, some in a small way, some in a big way, in order to ensure that their projects are looked after, are seen to. And it's about that sustainability. It's about that independence of our community. It's about that long-term generational impact that we can have if we realign the way we spend our resources or our sadaqah and our donations and our resources within the community. So it's not my system. It's not anybody else's system. It's a divine system. Even today, the students of Medina University and many of the visitors, the pilgrims that go to Medina, are beneficiaries of the water well that Sayyidina Uthman left behind. We all know the story of the well that he bought, and he left it for the growth and prosperity of the Muslim community, of the Ummah of Medina. It's still there, right? And the properties, the hotels that is around it, it's based and owned by that initial Wakaf, that preservation of that wealth that Sayyidina Uthman left behind. And it's still benefiting societies today.
So going forward now as Mickaeel, what are your plans for yourself and yourself with Okaf?
So going back to that whole issue of individualism, we are not individuals within the institution. Within Okaf South Africa, we're part of a structure that unfortunately has to have titles, right? It has to have a leadership structure in place. But it doesn't mean that our personalities are the organization or form. Yes, we contribute, but the bigger goal is to ensure that our communities are sustainable, that we popularize this concept of Wakaf, that we capacitate it to such an extent that our communities become less and less dependent on handouts, less and less dependent on resources from other people, and that we can capacitate ourselves. We can ensure that we are able to play a transformation role in the greater South African society, that we can give that dignity and that hope to humanity. And that is going to require support from people like you, right?
And the listeners.
And the listeners. It's going to require support that is going to be, that ensures that the vision that we have to reintroduce a concept that was decimated by colonialism. Because if you allow me just to digress very quickly, the Muslim leaders in India were only able to be defeated when the colonizers, the British and colonizers, destroyed the institution of Wakaf.
Yeah.
Because they had to continue, so they were killing their soldiers, but the Sultan and the Rajas, they had the money through the Wakaf system that just continued to build and to carry their society. They could buy food from other places. So if you destroyed the fields, they could get it from Africa. They could get soldiers from Africa. They could get a whole lot of different support structures. So they needed to have destroyed that system. And then within that transition period where we had certain of our rulers also usurping the institution of Wakaf, it was almost an institution that was battered, right? And there's a global revival movement to re-establish Wakaf. Today, Harvard University has an endowment that is based on Islamic principles. And I think it's like about 40 to 50 billion US dollars strong.
Wow.
I speak under correction, but it's either 100 billion or 40 or whatever.
But it's a system that works.
It's a system that works. The trust laws that we have in Western societies is based on the Wakaf system, the Wakaf trust deeds. So each person that donates a Wakaf has what is called a Waqfiyah, a trust deed, that outlines your wishes, your desires, and what you intend your wealth to be used for beyond your existence on this earth.
Alhamdulillah, it's a great system. I feel like I learned so much about you and about the, I'll say, Okaf institution. Shukran for joining us today. We will be spreading the word of your organization, and also just we connect the Muslims. That's what Muslims Connected is about. If you guys have any questions or I'll say suggestions, put it in the comment section. Find us on all the socials. I'm Yaaseen Barnes.
Mickaeel Collier.
You must say CEO.
No. The titles are not important.
Shukran for joining us today. This is the Muslims Connected podcast.